Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Tajweed for Beginners Lesson 1. Inshallah, in this series of videos, we will cover the basics of Tajweed, which is basically additional rules that one needs to recite the Quran properly. What we learned in the previous series, the Learn How to Quran for Beginners, we learned the letters and we learned the vowels and how to put the words together. But that's not enough when you're reciting Quran. You also need to learn the rules of Tajweed, like where do you have to do ghunna, which is where you have to read the word nasally, and where to stretch. You know, sometimes you might be listening to Quran and you might be wondering, why is the reciter stretching so long here versus stretching shorter somewhere else, or why is the person reading nasally here? So inshallah, in this series we will cover all these rules, and like I said, these are essential to proper recitation. Okay, one cannot recite the Quran properly without learning these rules. So inshallah, in lesson 1 we will cover mudud. Mudud is the plural of mad. Okay, and mad, so what is mad? Mad means to stretch a letter. Okay, so instead of saying ba, if you say ba, that's mud. Now the first and the most basic type of mud is mud tabi'i. Okay, and there's three types of mud tabi'i. The first is a fatha followed by an alif. So any letter that has a fatha followed by an alif, that's one kind of mud tabi'i. Okay, example is here ma. So mim has a fatha followed by alif. The next type of mad tabi'i is a dhamma followed by a waw sakina, right? So here ba has a dhamma followed by waw sakina. Okay, again, the first letter, right? The letter with the fatha or the letter with a dhamma can be any letter. The example of mim and ba, like, is just an example. I could have used any letter. And then a kasra followed by a ya sakin. So here we have ba as a kasra followed by ya sakin. Again, ba can be any letter. All of the above are stretched for 2 beats or 2 harakas. So now the question will arise is, what is a haraka? Okay, so if you take any letter, let's take the letter ba. Okay, and we put a fatha on it. How long do you stretch that? Ba, right? That's it. You don't. That may be a second, right? So that is one haraka. So these three, this one, and this one, they are the length of this times 2. Okay, because these are all 2 harakas. This is 1 haraka. Now, why do we say haraka and we don't say second, right? Like, we won't say that, oh, that's 2 seconds instead of 1 second. Wouldn't that be easier? Maybe, but a haraka can change, the length of haraka can change depending on the recitation of the reciter. Okay, so for example, if I say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم versus أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, right? In the first one, the haraka is longer, and in the second one, the haraka is shorter because I recited faster. So maybe in the first one, the haraka is a second, and maybe in the second one, the haraka is half a second. Okay, so the haraka can change. Moving on. Now, the next type is mad lazim. Okay, so mad lazim is basically after mad tabi'i, it is followed by a shadda, and the shadda is the W thing. Alright, and the above is stretched for 6 beats or 6 harakas. Okay, so the example is waladdallin in Surah Fatiha, right? So you stretch it, waladdallin. Okay, and so to now, when figuring out what kind of mud is, the first thing we look for is mad tabi'i. We have to determine which, if we have a mad tabi'i, because if we don't have a mad tabi'i, then we don't have a mud, right? Because that's the basic type of mud. Now after the mad tabi'i, if we have a shadda, now it's going to be a mad lazim. Okay, so looking at this word, do we have a mad tabi'i? Yes, we do. We have a fatha followed by alif, right? So we know that's the first type of mad tabi'i. So you would stretch it 2 harakas, right? Ba, right? But immediately after the fatha followed by alif is a shadda. So now it's 6 harakas. So you would say وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Okay. Now moving on. The next 2 types of mad is mad wajib muttasil and mad jaiz munfasil. The name of the mad is not important. If you know the rule, inshallah that is enough. So now mad wajib muttasil and mad jaiz munfasil, they're basically the same rule and you stretch it the same length. Inshallah later I will explain why they have different names. So mad tabi'i followed by a hamza in the same word. Okay, example ma'un, the above is stretched for 4 or 5 beats or harakas. Okay, so again the important things in this is same word and 4 or 5 beats and hamza. Okay, so here we have alif fatha followed by alif, so it's 2 harakas, and then immediately after we have a hamza, so now it's 4 or 5. So ma'un. Okay, now mad jaiz munfasil, same thing, you have a hamza in the next word. Okay, example kama umirt, the above is stretched for 4 or 5 harakas. Now here the kaf, mim and alif, the mim has a zabr and so does the fatha, and the kaf has a fatha too, and then the mim has a fatha followed by alif, so that's 2 harakas, that's mad tabi'i. And then we have a hamza, this right here, the alif or a dhamma is a hamza. And remember, anytime an alif has a vowel, meaning a dhamma, fatha or kasra, it's not called alif anymore, now it's called hamza. Okay, that's why this is hamza. So instead of kama umirt, this is read kama umirt. Alright, because it's 4 or 5 beats. Now if it's the same rule, why do we give it 2 different names, right? The only difference is here the hamza is in the same word, here the hamza is in the next word. The reason is because in some other recitations that are also from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the mad jaiz munfasil, it's allowed to be stretched only 2 harakas, right? But there are other rules that go on with that. So inshallah in the recitation that we're learning, which is Hafs an Asim from the Tariq of Shatibiyyah, okay, you have to stretch it 4 or 5 beats, 4 or 5 harakas. Okay, and just because I mentioned it, I'll write then what our recitation. It's called Hafs, okay, from Asim, okay, from Asim, and the tariq or the path is Shatibiyyah. And inshallah, if you're interested about what this is or what the different recitations are, there are books out there that inshallah you can purchase and read up on that. Inshallah you'll find articles online too. Shatibiyyah. Okay, so Hafs an Asim from the Tariq of Shatibiyyah. That's what we're learning. Inshallah that concludes the rules of mad. And inshallah in the next slide we will practice some recitation and I'll point out these mads. So moving on, this is from the second page of the Quran, the third page rather. Okay, we'll start from the top and we'll just recite a little bit. We'll recite slowly and I'll try to point out the mad rules to you. Okay, starting from here, the waw is empty, so we don't stretch, right? It's not waw sakin. So don't say oo, it's only oo, one haraka. Ulaika. Now one thing that I have to mention is if you have a standing alif, sorry, a standing fatha, okay? It's the same thing as a fatha followed by an alif, right? The mat tabi'i. So I'll write this out. If you have any letter, right, we'll use ba as an example, okay? If you have ba with a standing fatha, okay, it's the same thing as this. Ba with a fatha followed by alif. Or if you have ba with a standing kasra, it's the same thing as having ba with a ya sakin after it. Okay, ya sakin. Or if you have ba with a dhamma, standing dhamma, okay, that's the same thing as having ba with a waw sakin after it. Sorry, that should be a waw. This should be just one dot. Okay, same thing. So here we have the lam has a standing fatha. Ignore this sign on top. This basically is telling you to stretch, right? So just ignore it. We already know to stretch. The lam has a standing fatha followed by a hamza, right? So another way to write this would be like this. Take the lam, put a alif after it, right? The lam has a fatha followed by alif. Remember, so standing fatha is same thing as fatha followed by alif, and then after it is a hamza, right? Now and it has a kasra. And we know how long to stretch this, right? It's 4 or 5 harakas, and it's in the same word, so it's mad wajib. So ulaika ala, 2 harakas, standing fatha, ala hudam min rabbihim, wa, don't stretch, wa, don't stretch, wa ulaika humul muflihun, waw sakin with a dhamma before it, 2 harakas. Innal ladhina, ya sakin with a kasra before it. Innal ladhina kafaru, dhamma followed by waw sakin, 2 harakas. Kafaru sawa'un. Now look, ignore the mad, fatha followed by alif, so that's 2 harakas, and then immediately after that there's a hamza, so it's 4 or 5 harakas. Sawa'un alayhim, right? Alayhim a'anzartahum am lam tunzirhum la yu'minun. Look, this waw has a hamza on top, so it's actually a hamza and not a waw. So don't stretch this, right? Because it's not waw sakin here, it's actually hamza sakin. So dhamma followed by hamza sakin, you don't do mat tabi'i, you don't stretch for 2 harakas. La yu'minun, but this one you do because it's waw. Khatamallahu, right? You stretch the lam because it has a standing fatha. Khatamallahu ala qulubihim, stretch it, qulubihim, wa ala sam'ihim, wa ala. Now look, lam has a standing fatha, right? Ignore the wavy line, that's basically telling you that there's a mud here. Lam has a standing fatha followed by hamza. Remember, if an alif has a fatha, dhamma or kasra, it's called hamza. So now it's 4 or 5 harakas. وَعَلَى أَبْصَارِهِمْ غِشَاوَةٌ, sheen has a fatha followed by alif, 2 harakas. غِشَاوَةٌ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ, stretch it, عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, noon has a fatha followed by alif, so it's 2 harakas. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ you stretch it, 2 harakas. آمَنَّا, 2 harakas also, fatha followed by alif. بالله two harakas وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين وما هم بمؤمنين. Ya has a second with a kasra before it, two harakas. You stretch it two harakas. يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم. Lam has a fatha followed by alif, right? Two harakas, and then immediately after we have a hamza, right? An alif with a fatha, dhamma, or kasra, it's called hamza. إلا أنفسهم وما stretch it وما يشعرون. Inshallah, we will stop there. I hope that was beneficial, inshallah. I highly recommend that at this point you listen to some recitation on a daily basis from good qurra. So the best, right, that all the scholars of Tajweed recommend is Sheikh Khalil al-Husari, right? He was a master, rahimahullah, who passed away from Egypt. So if you go on websites like tanzil.net, right, I'll write that, tanzil.net, go to tanzil.net, and his name is Husari, rahimahullah. Okay, and if you pull up whatever page you want to listen to, inshallah, he will help you recite properly, and you'll get an ear for listening to correct recitation. But one thing you have to remember is the recording that they have Sheikh Husari in is where he stretches the hamza in the next word. Remember that? Mad jaiz, right? When we have mad tabi'i followed by hamza, right, in the next word, remember, according to the way we're learning, is 4 or 5 harakas. But in the recording, that in the he recited in the style that where you only stretch it 2 harakas. Okay, that's the one that's recorded. So he's only going to stretch that 2 harakas. Just be aware of that. But inshallah, in the method that we're learning, you have to stretch it 4 or 5 harakas, and you have to be consistent. You cannot change. However you start your recitation, you have to read like that the whole session. Okay, you can't change it. So inshallah, please keep that in mind, and please keep us in your dua. Inshallah, looking forward to seeing you on lesson 2. Assalamu alaikum.